Okay, so you went to Notre Dame University. What was that like as a California boy getting to Indiana?
Well, I remember that it was just beautiful in the fall, watching the leaves and the trees change color, and then the snow came and it was beautiful. And then I went outside, and I ran back inside, and I didn't go back outside again for 3 months. That's not exactly true, but it seemed like it. But the cold, I just could not stand the cold. Of course, they had these rooms with ceilings of about 20 feet high, and if there was any heat, it would go up to the top, and on the bottom, all you would do, you could hear the pipes, so you knew something was happening, but it wasn't heat. And so the weather was one big thing that I had a lot of trouble with. I was pretty sickly my whole life, I think. I don't know if I mentioned that to anybody else, but I had a lot of sicknesses. I always led my class in absences due to sickness. I had tonsillitis, I had measles, chickenpox, and appendicitis all at the same time. I had pneumonia, my tonsils out. I don't know, I could go on.
But you were sick a lot also.
Later life gallbladder. At any rate, if you wanted to find out what virus was going around or flu was going around, what was coming, you'd call me, or what had just left, you'd call me, and I'd still have it. In fact, in working, I would always call the clerk when I was sick and tell him, well, I'm sick, but I'm not getting much better, I'll be there tomorrow. And that tomorrow would go on, and tomorrow.
Okay, so back in college, what did you study in college?
I didn't study well. I studied to get good grades, and I was pretty good at that, except for ROTC, where I studied I didn't really like ROTC, but I had this bad habit, I think. At that time, I thought it was a good habit of sticking things out, and I probably should have quit ROTC.
Why did you take ROTC?
Well, when I started, I thought that I was going to get drafted one way or the other after school. That's sort of the way people thought at the time. Not everybody, of course. And so I thought it would be a good thing to go through ROTC and be able and get it paid for and be an officer instead of an enlisted man.
And you started in college or in high school already?
In college.
In college.
I actually did have an ROTC in high school,
Yeah.
but I never did that. You had a choice of taking Greek or ROTC.
And
I took Greek.
You took Greek.
Yeah, 2 years. Didn't learn much.
So what was your major in college?
In college, I majored in political science, but there were some good teachers. I can't really blame. I didn't learn a lot in college, I think. And I can blame it partly on the teachers. There were a lot of distinguished teachers who spoke many languages, but English was not one of them. But I think mainly it was my fault. I didn't have that interest in learning that I should have. There were a lot of opportunities that I see now that I didn't take to learn a lot more than I did. I managed to get pretty good grades, and I can remember also studying with friends of mine for exams where they knew much more than I did, but I would end up getting a better grade, and I think that was because I had a better knack at expressing myself than they did, even though that they had more knowledge of the subject matter.
So you took political science classes?
I majored in political science. I almost majored in sociology, and I was very lucky because we had a class, and the dean, number of years later, wrote a little essay, and he said that was one of the things that was one of his biggest mistakes, having this class. And to me, I think it was the great thing because it kept me from majoring in sociology, which, at least at that time, was not a very good major. Mm-hmm. And what happened was we had a class there was 1/3 political science, 1/3 sociology, and 1/3 economics. And the first third was sociology. It was all taught by the same teacher. And I thought, this guy is really great. He really talks wonderful stuff. You know, he told us all this BS stuff. And then he got to economics. And as soon as we got into economics, you realized he didn't know a thing about what he was talking about. We knew more than he did, and the same thing in political science. And so it awakened me to at least what was the state of sociology at Notre Dame at the time. And although I said I didn't study very hard my other subjects, it would have been worse had I been majoring in sociology, I think.
What were your best subjects in high school and college?
Well, I always got very good grades in the religion courses. I'll tell you, and I'm not sure why, because I can remember one in college where there was this crazy teacher, and his test would be, he would state a proposition. He would say, state whether this is true or false, and then part B was, state whether this is a good or bad reason for the truth or falsity of the statement. And nobody could understand what he meant, and I always got them all right. And usually, and then we would go over the test in class, and usually I'd gotten them right for the wrong reason. But somehow I always got good grades in that. My best courses were the ones where and this is probably true of almost everybody, where I had a good teacher. In philosophy, I had one philosophy course where there was a very good teacher, and I enjoyed it, but I did the reading, and same thing for one political science course. And then there were always the easier courses, and I studied the easier courses very hard sometimes, because there I could get a really high grade easily. I didn't like ROTC, and I decided I wanted to get the lowest grade I could get and still stay in the program. So that was my goal, and I achieved that for a while until I think it was junior year. And for some reason, I think we were playing a tennis match or something, and I couldn't take the exam. And so I told Bucci was his name, I think, the major who was in charge, and that I couldn't take the exam because I was playing tennis. And he said, "Oh, you play tennis? Don't worry about it." And all of a sudden I started, whereas with the amount of work I was getting 75s on, all of a sudden I was getting 95s on my tests. Doing the same amount of work.
Terrible.
You asked the question.
I asked the question. Did you tell Ricky did you talk about your trip to Mexico with the tennis
No,
team?
I never talked about that. I didn't. That's sort of the sad part of my life, my bad relationship with my coach.
What was his name?
Fallon. We had Tom Fallon. We had a coach. We had the one that recruited us. Sampson was his name. He was an excellent player and a very nice man. But he got a job after our freshman year as an engineer. He was a civil engineer, and left school and left us with Mr. Fallon, who was the wrestling coach, who knew nothing about tennis. And I will say the one good thing about him that I have to say in tennis was he knew that he didn't know a lot about tennis, so he didn't try to, at least the top players, which I was one, he didn't try to tell how to play tennis. He may have not been so nice to the lesser players, but for some reason, well, I had a problem. We went, in our senior year, we went to Mexico during Easter time to play, and when I mean play tennis. And I got sick. I got the turista, typical case of turista. I was vomiting and diarrhea and nausea and everything. I lay in bed. We went to Acapulco for a few days off, and all I did was lie in bed for about, I don't know how long it was, but say 4 or 5 days. And then I got well. And when I got well, we came back and we had some more tennis to play in Mexico City. And I told the coach, I'm now well enough to play. I can play now. And he said, well, first you have to see a doctor. And I said, I don't need a doctor now. I could have used a doctor before, but I didn't say that. But he insisted that I see a doctor. So he he said, I can't let you play until you see a doctor. So I went and saw a doctor, and the conversation was something like this. And I went into the room, and he was sitting behind a desk, and he said, what is the matter? And I said, I had the tourista, and now I am well. And then he called Coach Fallon in, and he said, he had the tourista, and now he is well. And that was it. And nothing else happened. We continued. And then when we got back to, it was later in the season, and they were deciding how to divide up certain things we had to pay for on our trip and certain things the school was paying for. And Mr. Fallon said, Ronnie, you're going to have to pay for having seen the doctor. And I protested. I said, I didn't want to see the doctor. He didn't do anything for me. I was already well. You were the one that wanted me to see the doctor, and I don't think I should have to see the doctor. And then Mr. Fallon said, you'd have a hard time proving that your whole sickness was not just the result of an extended hangover. I'm not sure what he meant by that. You could tell me what he meant by that. Maybe it was the doctor that supported me. I don't know. But anyway, my roommate at the time, Max Brown, who was the type of personality and he was the #1 player on the team and co-captained the team with me. And he was furious. And he took his hands up on the table, banged them down on the table, and he said, Mr. Fallon, that's the dirtiest thing I've ever heard. And there was complete silence. It seemed like 5 minutes. It was probably 15 seconds, but and the subject was dropped and never brought up again. But I think he resented that I didn't pay that, because at the end of the year, we went to the NCAA championships at Northwestern, and I got to the quarterfinals of the doubles and lost. And as soon as I lost, he said, Ronnie, we can't pay for your being here anymore. You have to go home or pay yourself for being here. So I left and went home. Before I left, I dumped all my clothes. That we didn't have a manager with us. So I dumped all my Notre Dame clothes in his room and left. I didn't hear anything till a few weeks later, maybe a month later, and he said, and then I got this letter from him saying, Ronnie, you think you're going to get some reward for our team winning the NCAA? I didn't even know we'd won the NCAA. Actually, we tied for the NCAA with another team. But he said, you think you're going to get some reward, but you're not going to get anything until you return the clothing you stole. So I was furious. I didn't even write him back. I wrote a letter to, I can't remember whether it was the vice principal or the athletic director, or maybe it was Father Hesburgh, the principal himself, or maybe copies to all of them. But I just wrote them, I don't care if I get anything, I want to have anything to do with it, but I just want you to know what kind of a guy Mr. Fallon is. And I really left a very bad taste in my mouth about Notre Dame, and I haven't had anything to do with it, probably very unfairly. But I haven't had anything to do with the school since then. We did manage to win the NCAA, mainly because my roommate, Max Brown, almost single-handedly got us points. He got to the semifinals of the singles and to the finals of the doubles with our #4 player and our #2 player. Got to the quarterfinals. Don Ralph and with me got to the quarterfinals of doubles. I didn't do very well at all. My excuse, if you hear about my tennis, I always have an excuse. But there wasn't the money for me to go home and back, and the NCAA was about a month later. And so after graduation, Max Brown invited me, and along with me, Larry, who had come from my graduation, to stay at his house, and I was in his party he was getting married, and I was an usher at the wedding, and we stayed there, and then we came back to Notre Dame, and there was nobody for me to practice with. The only person I played with was Larry, who is not a tennis player, doesn't play tennis, and he hit me balls. I tried my best to practice, but it's not the the same as playing with people. So when I got to Northwestern to play, I really had no tennis at all. And I almost lost in the first round. I played a pretty good player. And then in the afternoon, I had to play another good player who beat me fairly straight sets.
Okay.
But in doubles, we managed to get to the quarterfinals. So it was an essential point
Yeah.
to our time for the NCAA championships.
Yeah, that's true. So when did you decide you were going to law school?
Well, law school, I think I may have discussed this with one of your siblings, but I always say that, and I really think it's true, that when you go to college, if you're really smart, if you're literary, you'll major in English or philosophy or something like that, and you'll become either a poor teacher or poor in money, a teacher or a philosopher or a writer, if you're really talented, or if you're good in science, then you go into science or medicine or math or engineering maybe. But if you're fairly smart and yet you have none of these other real talents, and you don't want to go to work after college, you go into law. You become a lawyer. Now it's what do you call it? Investment banker, because they're making money. But law is a nice profession, and it's not like investment banker. There's theory of law. It's close. It's related to philosophy, and it's related to a lot of things. And it's sort of an interesting thing, up to a point. And you go in as a default, and that's what I did. I think I became a default lawyer.
I think you told me that lawyers are people who are sort of good at a lot of things, but not really good at anything.
Yeah, I said that not to criticize you, but as a self-criticism.
Yeah. So you decided to go to law school, and what law schools did you apply to?
I don't really know if I applied to anywhere else but Berkeley. I applied to Berkeley, and I knew one of my teachers, philosophy teacher, I asked him to send me a recommendation. I tried for a scholarship at Berkeley, and the teacher told me, oh yes, I'm on the committee that I write the Woodrow Wilson, I know scholarships, and I know just what they want. And don't worry, I know just what to write. You will never even recognize yourself. Finished. And I did get the scholarship, and I don't know if I applied to anywhere else. I know I never considered anywhere else.
I don't even know if UCLA had a law school at that time.
Oh yeah, they had a law school, but UCLA Law School was a lot less good than Berkeley.
Yeah.
The two top law schools in California were Stanford and Berkeley, by far. And then there was